I'm Bill Ulrich, and there's Dennis Paul. How's the other person there?
Yeah, hello.
Hi. Okay.
I looked at a lot of websites and read as much as I could about your background, and
Yeah.
I usually prepare a bunch of questions for somebody if we're going to do an interview, and I got lost. I didn't know where to start, where to go, because you've done so much. And prior to, I guess, 2016 or so, you were involved with a lot of different organizations, both nonprofits, government, the Smithsonian, and very few people do that much. So it's pretty hard to say, well, I'll make up a question about the Smithsonian. So what I thought we could do instead of that is just talk about maybe a little bit about what you did prior to, it sounds like 2016 was the year you decided to kind of walk away from those types of things and focus pretty much totally on global warming and climate change. And so I guess I would like to hear, and I think a lot of people would like to hear what you've been doing. I mean, people have been doing, scientists have been writing a lot about global warming for a long time, but in terms of sort of practical solutions, you were probably ahead of an awful lot of people. So I think it'd be interesting to hear and just talk about what you did and why and where things are going. And probably, but I don't know if I should say it. I read a lot of biographies and people. But when I saw that your dissertation was about the long-nosed mongoose in West Africa, I just sort of thought, this is good. This is like a real scientist. And so I was looking for. So anyway, that's it. So if you wanted to maybe just talk about what you've all gone through and where we're at, and a lot of people are hoping that something's being done that can maybe reverse things, and you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, thanks. Should I go ahead and jump in? Any other?
Yeah,
okay.
no, that
Yeah,
and we can just talk, I guess.
Yeah. So the work that I used to do was, I was, basically grad school prepares you to be pure scientist. But when I was in Africa studying long-nosed mongoose, Prosarchus obscurus, which is a very interesting name, I saw a lot of deforestation, and I decided I had to work on conservation issues. So I actually, then was the first time I kind of stepped away from pure research. I finished my dissertation, but I decided to live in Washington, DC, so I could work in applied areas. So I consulted with the National Zoo a little bit. I consulted with World Wildlife Fund, and I worked for the Smithsonian for 8 years, trying to get biological information out there, trying to educate people, especially in conservation areas. So, so that was all good. And then I worked on the US Geological Survey, which has actually a biology department in it. I worked a lot on being a liaison and trying to bring in data and information, bringing it together so that people could actually use it, and informatics. And that's where I learned a lot about, how to present information, how to share that information, how to pull it together. I mean, I was always a researcher, but I was a literature, reading the literature and diving into technical details. But this was data and information out on the internet and pulling it together. And it was very important. So like one thing we were doing is, invasive species information, pulling that data from different sightings of invasive species so that you could draw a map of where an invasive species was. But Congress cut our budget and 60 of us lost our jobs. So I then went to the American Association of Advancement of Science. And there I worked a lot on kind of troubleshooting things, troubleshooting national research programs. I would travel around the US with a panel and would go and work with research programs that were federally funded, especially, and find out what was working and what wasn't working. So in the process of all of this, I went from being a mongoose biologist to basically a jack of all trades environmental scientist. I worked on, I did research on the prairies of the US and the farming conditions and landscape use. And so throughout all of this, I got to know some climate scientists along the way and work with them. And I began to understand how fearful they were for the future and how frustrated they were in not getting information out. And I'm not a climate scientist, I'm an environmental scientist, basically, but it became clear you can't have an environment without a climate. So as I worked, I just became more concerned. And then in 2016, there was the presidential election where President Trump was elected, and I was extremely worried about even the current safeguards for the environment being dismantled. So it was really a turning point for me, but it wasn't quite a complete turning point. It was, I had been blogging about adventures and everything up until then. I used to have this mantra of I had to have an adventure each week, whether it was a new food or a new activity or something like that. So I've been blogging about that. So taking that puzzle piece and my environmental history, and I started blogging about, my concerns about the environment. Two friends took me to lunch and they said, Annette, you really need to, they first asked, what can we do to save the environment? What can we do to save the climate? So we had a great table talk discussion. And then they said, you need a blog about this. So that's when I formed Climate Steps. I formed it initially just as a blog, and it was going to, I was doing it on the side of my job at AAAS. And I did that for 3 years, but it was obvious that people needed this. They really needed to know what they can do about climate change. And at that time, there were no other sites that really dealt with it. Or if they did, it was very superficial. It was go recycle and vote and call your representative. It wasn't in depth and as useful as it could be. So in 2019, I decided I needed to quit my job and start Climate Steps as a nonprofit. So that's where we are. We were a learning hub now on with our website, but we also have a growing Facebook community that is very collaborative, very interactive, and we work on with that community to gather ideas, to pull information in and write summary articles for Climate Steps. And if we pull information in for Climate Steps, and we often check it against the group and see what they think. So Climate Steps is this learning hub, but it's also a community, and it's just fantastic. And I'm so glad I made this change. So basically, so that's the rundown of kind of the history of Climate Steps. Yeah.
I'm sorry, did that lead into the, there are a couple websites that I guess you're involved with. One is Earth Hero.
Yes.
And the Climate Steps. Is that what, are those the ones that you got started with?
Yeah, so Earth Hero came along. I had Climate Steps going, and this coder named Ben Gerald, actually I've never really pronounced his last name before. He approached me and said that he wanted to start an app, and would I be interested in starting an app about climate actions? So, and I was like, yes, because I don't have the bandwidth. Right now, Climate Steps is really kind of a one-woman show right now with volunteers, but I don't have the IT staff to start an app. And he was going to code, and he talked to Peter Kalmus, who's a climate scientist, well known for the book called Be the Change. And so the three of us started Earth Hero. So that's been kind of a project. Climate Steps is my day job now, but Earth Hero is my evening job. And it's fantastic because Earth Hero, we're building this database of climate actions. And we're doing the research behind them about like, what's the impact of some of these climate actions? So, and Climate Steps is doing research. So we're basically just sharing information across the way as we're both growing. So Earth Hero is an app that you can download, and it is both for Apple and for Android. And so right now, I think we have over 100 actions in there, which is actually still a small number, but they're good actions. And we have about 26,000 users, I think, for that app. So there's that. And then in there, kind of my weekend job, Green Neighbors DC, which is a local, hyper-local community. And there we do actions that are about neighbors helping neighbors go green, or petitioning the city to make a change about the street light pollution. One great thing that we just started that we actually got inspiration from an article submitted to Climate Steps was tool library, starting a tool library within the city of DC. And this is where you check out tools like garden rakes or wheelbarrows, power tools like miter saws, everything. Instead of people buying tools, especially people who can't afford the resources, they can just go and check it out, check one out. So it turned out, so we started doing research on starting a tool library. This is Green Neighbors DC. We started doing research on starting a tool library in DC, and then we found this little known one that DC was actually running. And the weird thing was, it's only 4 blocks from my house. So it was just kind of a little strange that, yeah, anyway, I can walk to it. And so we are collaborating with the city now to run this tool library and to make it more known and market it and get donations of tools for it and help clean the tools, etc. And we had a tour of the tool library last Saturday, and it was very successful. But yeah,
fantastic. The what is Climate Stuff? How is that different?
So Climate Steps, basically what we're doing is we're gathering information about what people can do to fight climate change. So there are so many actions out there that are beyond the putting a new LED light bulb in your lamp. That I want people to know about the options they have for climate action and climate steps. And it could be easy, it can be ambitious, you could be a homeowner, you could be a renter, but there are things out there that a lot of people don't realize. A man last year wrote a letter protesting the limits on solar capacity for residential houses. So up until last year, we had a limit of you could not put on more solar panels than would generate 104% of your use. Basically, you are only allowed to put solar panels on that would work for your home. But the guy wrote a long letter, pulled out references. This one person, he sent the letter into the city of the Department of Public Works, I think, and argued that we should be putting in more. And next thing you know, the rules have changed and we can now have up to 200% of generating power on our roofs. And so now we become power distributors. We help our neighbors become green. So things like that. But there are also, there are things like having an outdoor movie about climate change and inviting your neighbors and having a potluck. There is, putting up signs. There are different levels of action, and there's some confusion out there about individual action versus personal action. Personal action is kind of your home and what you want to do, but a lot of people call that individual action. But an individual can do so much more. You can comment on federal public regulations, and that has a huge voice, huge power in setting the tone of a regulation, because the NEPA Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, that came around in the 70s, means that every federal agency has to read those comments and has to address those comments in their regulations. So some more of that is needed. So there are all sorts of examples. And what we want to do is bring in, Climate Steps wants to bring in the facts behind things. And so right up until now, we've presented the diversity of actions, for everything from, yes, eating less meat actually is impactful, to, to our electric vehicles impactful, etc. We've been presenting the diversity, but now we want to take it to the next level. And that's when in 2020, we formed a nonprofit, because we're going to start building tools to help people select actions that are really better suited for their situations. So if you're a renter, you can't very well say, I'm going to put solar panels on my roof, or I'm going to insulate the attic. You have other options that are actions, like talk to your fellow renters and get them to convince the landlord, to put insulation in, or things like that.
Have you thought about or talked about trying to expand it to other cities?
Yeah, I would love that. Green Neighbors, there are a couple of neighborhood groups that do similar things, but they vary, definitely. But there actually is a lack of neighborhood groups that do stuff like this, that pull in speakers. One good one is the North County Climate Change Association, which is in California, and they have a lot of good speakers. There are a couple in Washington State, but other than that, there are nonprofits that have chapters within each big city, like Sierra Club, and there's Environment America. But in terms of it being kind of really grassroots, neighbors helping neighbors, and coming up with ideas for like how to insulate. Like one thing we want to do in Green Neighbors is build energy efficiency, put together energy efficiency kits for the elderly and distribute them through the churches. Because there are a lot of elderly women in the houses, and they get assistance from the city, but giving them some examples, giving them some LED light bulbs or something like that, even will help them. And we want to be able to survey neighbors and really understand what people in a particular neighborhood really needs. So yeah, so I could see it being replicated, and that would be good. It's just a matter of volunteers and time and potential staff in the future and so on.
Yeah, I wonder always again about I'll probably get semi off topic, the educating people, helping sort of informing them of what's going on, which is always an issue. And I saw a little piece on a news show that was talking about showing what the post office had to do in order to get people to understand zip codes. It went on for years. They did all kinds of little routines geared to kids, like 4-year-olds, instead of just being able to come out and explain to people how a zip code works. And so it's like, I was thinking, whoa, now we're talking about something a little more complicated. And I wonder how you're doing. I mean, are you finding it easy enough to get through to people, I guess?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because when I worked at the Smithsonian, I worked in education, and we built exhibits. That was my role at the Smithsonian, was to bring in the science for exhibits. And I learned a lot about how to translate science over to the general public. But this climate change is a different subject. It's a scary subject, and people, the news is very dire. It's very strong and depressing. So not only do you have to explain, kind of how things work in terms of climate action, but you have to fight this fear of climate change that behavior scientists show makes people want to withdraw. When people are faced with a threat, they tend to withdraw. And so how do you work against that fear? So, and that's kind of one of the other main purposes of Climate Steps. Climate Steps is for people who already know to act, but our goal is to encourage them. So with every post in Facebook, if somebody puts something that's really bad news, we have a rule that you have to put in action with it. And providing a positive action, something that people can do, helps alleviate that fear of withdrawing.
Okay, you're substituting kind of positive actions for fear. I think when people hear about global warming or getting involved, the first reaction is, I don't want my taxes to go up. I don't want taxes on gasoline. Don't want to spend the money. And you're, excuse me, you're on the opposite side. You're showing people how they can come out ahead by doing something positive. I've seen articles that show, for example, how much money you can save with an LED light. It's saves you a lot of money over time. And but people weren't told that in the beginning. And I'd run into people that said, I don't want the government telling me what kind of a light bulb I can use. And the benefits got ignored. And so what you're doing seems to be focusing mainly on the benefits, personal benefits that people get from acting.
Yeah, benefits for themselves, benefits for their children. I'm a biologist. A lot of what I'm doing is to save species. I want elephants to still exist. I want platypuses. A lot of people are in climate justice. They want their neighborhoods improved, which you can do through a lot of actions that are tied to climate change, planting trees, for instance. So there's a lot of that. It also, I think, part of why I got into it was I was frustrated about waiting for government action and being told to wait, that we had to wait for representatives and we had to protest to get industry to change. And I was like, yeah, but I want to do something and other people want to do something. We don't want to be told that we should just hold back and let the government fix things. So it's kind of opposite of what you were just saying. We don't like being told what to do. So we want to work on climate change and we want to make a difference and we want to be part of the solution. And so there's a lot we can do in that. So it's exciting. Transportation, so many realms. So it's good. So yeah.
That's good. It all sounds good. We're relatively new at this and we're expanding kind of quickly. We are
I saw, yeah.
international and we have ambassadors now in over 45 countries. So we're hoping to help bring the people of the world together to have an impact on both corporations and governments who right now are maybe listening more to lobbyists and fossil fuel people than the actual people. So we're hoping to change that. And so part of that was to form partnerships, which is where you came in. So
yeah,
one is how can we help you sort of working back and forth with a partnership arrangement?
yes, that's yeah, it's going to be interesting. I've been looking at your website and as I was telling Maggie, who was the first person I talked to from your organization, different organizations have different perspectives and bring in different tools. And one of the things that I really liked that we're not doing is kind of the create section. And you're also working on the videos and the live streaming. And I don't have the capacity to do that. But what you're also sharing ideas about actions that people can take through that process. So, I could become a resource for that. Climate Steps could be. Sharing some of your resources on our site, sharing ideas, even having meetings about what are different foci that we should be focused on. Anyway, that was a weird sentence, but yeah.
That was really informative. I wasn't sure if we talked for 5 minutes or longer. So this is very good. Thank you very much.
Oh, yes. And thank you. Thanks for the interest in kind of 3 different ways of fighting the climate crisis. And hopefully we'll be talking again. And if you have any questions about like particular subjects or types of actions, just holler.
Very good. Thank you again.
Well, I made a number of notes here that we want to talk to you about, that things that we should consider ourselves in our overall projects. And we're fairly new to this. I mean, compared to you. So we need all the help we can. And we have a big appetite to try to change the world. And
yeah.
And we're looking for anybody that can join us and help change the world. Maybe we can give you more exposure too, because you're doing a lot of wonderful things. I really like your green program that you have in neighborhoods. I'm wondering, my first thought is, how can you expand that? How can you maybe do some ads on Facebook? Try to, or share it to other groups. We have a lot of groups that possibly we could share it with too. So there's a lot of things that I think you're doing that I think that the public should do. So I really, I think that you're doing a wonderful job, and
thanks.
I'm glad we're connecting.
Yeah, I'm very glad we're connecting too. The resources that you are already sharing are amazing. So I was looking at even your posters, that you have that people can share, that the ambassadors can share through their groups. I'd love to see some action posters in there, about what people can do, actually do that's impactful. And yeah, so very cool. Yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you.
So, yeah.
I'm really glad we had it. I have to, we'll look forward to the future.
Thanks. Same here. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.